Alright, what's up everyone? Thanks for tuning in to Meshek's Aatrox guide. For some reason YouTube... Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to Meshek's Aatrox guide. Gonna go over a lot of the matchups, just generally how to play him, some items, some runes, all the basic stuff. I had a few people ask me about it, and then I also just kind of wanted to get one out there on the channel since I don't think I actually have one. But I'm gonna dive right in. Alright, so first slide, why should I... Oh yeah, this is just like some shitty PowerPoint, by the way. I'll eventually make a nice video with some good editing and stuff, but for now I just want to get the information out there for people to start using in their seasons and such. So first off, just some fun shit to get out of the way. Why should I one-trick Aatrox? He's got cool lore. Both the old lore and the new lore are pretty awesome. You get to appreciate His more. His has risen in popularity recently, but a lot of people don't realize that he's mainly an Aatrox streamer, and he's actually good at the character too. So he's one of the better people to watch to learn from him. Even if you gotta mute him so you don't have to hear what he says, you can get a lot from his gameplay. He is mechanically intense, so a lot of people like Zed, Yasuo, Riven, champs like those. So he's one of them. Quite a high learning curve, but it will pay off if you do a good job learning him. He can be blind picked. By that I just mean that he might not have any super bad or super good matchups, but he can be picked into any game, and for that reason you're also going to be able to see him in pro play. And that means that you could see your favorite teams or streamers or whatever playing him, and he'll just be in high elo, a lot in general. So you could kind of learn from a lot of people. What lane can he be played in? I put down any except ADC, and then once you get into higher elo, then not in jungle either, really. But the main reason for that is that his kit just allows him to survive lane phase pretty well. Um, and he just has a lot of CC and a lot to his kit that he could be utilized in different ways. So mid lane he can have more of like a damage focused. Top lane you get more of like that bruiser build. And then support you just get a lot of that utility from the 3 knockups on your Q and the repositioning and your W pullback. He's just kind of a really good good kit in general. Lot to his champ. Runes. So there's two big schools of thought when it comes to runes for Aatrox. So a lot of people think that you kind of got to live and die by Conqueror, and I wouldn't say that's the boat that I'm in, but I find that in most games that is the case, where Conqueror is going to be the better matchup. But he's just, it's just a good rune in general. Gives you a lot of damage, gives you a lot of healing. Um, Pretty much in a lot of games you're going to have a lot of fights where you're just constantly whacking at each other until one team dies and the other, gets an objective or whatever. So it's just going to be constantly used. The other school of thought is that you could use runes depending on the lane, depending on the game, depending on the situation. And for that reason I did include some of them down below, but I don't use them, as oftenly in my games these days, just because Conqueror normally is the best choice to go with. But I'll explain all of them and where they're good at. So Electrocute, good in games with squishy champions, and it's going to be good in games where you can't get Conqueror procs. So by that what I mean is if you're against a lot of people who kind of throw abilities or auto attack from a distance, you're not really going to be, auto attacking them, so you can't proc your Conqueror. So that's why it's best to get Electrocutes to just kind of get the combo off and then burst them down. Fleet Footwork, good versus heavy poke and ranged, so think like your Gangplank and your ADC tops that are so cancerous. So you still get like the precision tree to delve into, but it's going to be more of like a surviving rune. It also gives you some move speed too, which is underrated in lane, and kind of unexpected too, since you don't really see a lot of Aatrox with the fleet footwork. I did put at the end that it's specifically for lane phase and not good in team fights. That's just because every other rune will be a lot better in team fights. This just kind of helps with your positioning later on, as the healing isn't going to be significant enough to matter. Aftershock, so that's good in solo queue, especially just because team comps aren't, very good all the time, and in some situations you're just going to have 5 people that are trying to be the carry, and in those games you can go Aftershock and be the tank and be the main source of engage. I also put there that if you play support Aatrox, which I do when I'm autofilled or just for fun sometimes, It allows you to go kind of head to head with all those skirmishes going on and not getting, bursted down, because you are somewhat squishy without it, and without the healing that you get through items. The last one I have there is Grasp of the Undying. So that one's good for all of your poke heavy matchups. And I wrote right there like Poppy, for example. But in general, I just say that Grasp is kind of like a learning rune. I pick that whenever I don't really understand a matchup completely. And even though I've played like every matchup, you find that out that there's new ways that the enemies can react to certain things you do. So you just don't understand matchups after a while, and you have to relearn them or relearn a part of them to understand it. But in those games, I tend to go Grasp just so I don't get punished too hard, and I could survive until that mid game while I'm learning it. And it's never a bad option either, because it is in the resolve tree, so you still have things like that demolish for towers. You still get some init healing, so it's never a bad choice. Items. So this is kind of short and sweet. Starting items: D-Blade if they poke, D-Blade if you're going to be able to auto attack a bunch and heal, or if you just want to damage them. Core items: pretty much these are always going to be good. Death Stance and Cleaver. You get a lot of health, damage, healing, pretty much everything you want on Aatrox in top lane, actually, specifically. Then I put down some common item 3s. That Ghostblade is a good item 1 or 2 if you are playing mid lane or jungle. But pretty much Spirit Visage good into AP and just in general to get you a lot of healing. Steric's Gauge helps you survive until your healing comes online. Also gives you a lot of health and AD. And then I already touched on Ghostblade a little bit for mid lane. Just gives you more damage, a little bit more CDR. Good item. Alright, so I'm going to dive into the matchups. So instead of going over, every matchup specifically, because I figure it's easier to learn, groups of matchups or groups of champions rather than learning, say there's 60 different champs top lane. It's going to be a lot harder to learn all 60 matchups. Better to understand, say, like 6 or 7 different groups of champions that may do different things, but at least that way you could kind of know how to play against everyone, and then it becomes just a lot easier to learn from there. But the first slide for the easy matchups, I grouped up some people that have little to no mobility. And a lot of these champs, you'll find when they have low mobility, they're also going to be just farming for the late game. So it's just going to be easy to kind of poke them out. So the only way that you really win these matchups, you just got to hit your skill shots. So it's not very, hard to play these matchups. And some of the champs in here, Cho'Gath, no movement. Nasus, no movement. Vladimir does have his pool, but if you already hit your W first, it will still pull him back. So it's really an easy matchup for you. Kayle. Kayle does have a tiny bit of movement speed, but it's very, very easy to play around. Rise only gets movement speed through runes if he takes them. If he doesn't, he has none. Then Mundo, that one's pretty easy as well. No real movement on him. The only thing is that you can't freeze necessarily too well against a Mundo, just because he can still kind of, try last hitting with cleavers and still collect a lot of CS. But in general, I mean, by easy, I don't necessarily mean that you win the matchups, but it's just very easy to play them out. And you could focus on other aspects while you're playing these matchups. Oh, I don't have a title here, but these are supposed to be medium matchups. Oh, my title went to the bottom over here for some reason. These are medium matchups, and you'll find that most champions will fall under this category right here. But basically, they're going to have mobility just like the other champions, but they may have a little more mobility, or they also have some counterplay available for when you go to hit your skill shots. But let me just kind of list them and explain why that happens. So Garen, he has a Q, so he could escape from the root. He can dodge some skill shots. He also has tenacity, so he's not really affected as much by CC or your poke. Jarvan, of course, he can jump. Jax can jump. Malphite has Q for move speed. Sion, he just has a lot of counterplay. If you use all your Qs on him, he'll be able to reposition and hit you with his Q, which is a good setup for a jungler. Urgot has a juke and move speed. Yasuo has a ton of ways that he can juke. The way that you beat Yasuo is you don't aim your ability where he is, you rather aim your ability where he will be once he goes through a minion that he's posturing at, which is a little hard to do, but once you learn it's very easy to take care of Yasuo's. That's why I put him in the medium instead of the hard category. A lot of these champions that you see here, if anyone looked at my Season 9 guide, they were in the hard category, and then you just kind of figure out the trick to them, and it's a lot easier to play against them. You have Teemo. Once he builds up movement speed with either boots or his W, he could be hard to hit with abilities, so you just got to kind of take him out early game before he gets that chance. You have Quinn, obviously going to be very mobile in the top lane. Can also roam at 6, so you're kind of on a time clock to get some work done, either a good CS lead or a kill or two. Vayne, that's one of the infamous top lane cancer picks, but it's actually not that bad. The real way that Vayne can do damage to you is if she Q autos, or if she gets her 3W proc off. So you could easily play around those two abilities. Gnar, I used to think Gnar was super difficult, but he's actually not too bad to play against. He only really has his E for mobility, so once his E is down, he's very easy to take out. Aurelia, I was considering putting Aurelia in the difficult category just because he has a lot of healing and CC. So even if you were to hit your abilities on him, doesn't necessarily guarantee that you win the 1v1 against him. Still depends on things like your minions versus theirs, jungle pressure, wave manipulation. But I did end up putting it in the medium category because it is beatable if you play it correctly. Singed. So Singed builds up a lot of movement speed over time, and he's just very tanky in general. So poke doesn't do, too much against him. He could also sustain it pretty well. Kennen can be quick with his lightning storm, so it's hard to land abilities on him. And then your W cooldown is pretty close to his lightning storm. So I mean, there's not really a chance to go in when that ability, excuse me, is down. Lucian, obviously very mobile and ranged, so you have a lot to deal with him. Sylas has several dashes, but the thing is, a lot of his dashes require that he go on you for them to land or whatever. So it's easy to hit your abilities in that situation, which is why he's only a medium category laner. Yorick. So Yorick is very easy to hit the abilities on since he is very slow. The only thing is that he has a lot of CC that he could use on you, both slows and stuns, so it gets harder to play that matchup when you have to worry about that as well as hitting him. Okay, so hard matchups. Just want to make sure I didn't freeze the video. I accidentally did that earlier. Okay, so these are the heavy mobility hard matchups. So these characters just kind of move a lot, and that'll be because of the kits, it'll be because of the runes that they take and the summoners that they take. So Callista, I mean, he gets a dash every ability or every auto, so he's gonna be jumping around a lot, and when he's strong, he can be very oppressive. Cassiopeia, his Q gives him a lot of mobility, plus because he can't build boots, that good meme, he obviously can't, or I mean he has some built-in move speed as well. Camille moves a lot with her, I think it's her E that lets her jump on walls and then on people, but what's difficult about that is that it can't be stopped by like your Q, for example, like a knockup, so that's why that one is hard as opposed to just being a medium. And then Tryndamere, he can outrun your chains, he can E through your chains, and then he just gets resets on his dashes whenever he gets some autos off, which isn't very hard to do in a long lane like top lane, so he's in the hard category. And then I also have Darius in the hard category, and a lot of people may say that Darius, isn't too difficult to deal with, but I'm thinking like, say that someone gifted Darius a kill, you're no longer on equal footing. That's not going to be a very equal lane at that point. So one mistake can put you there, even someone else on your team's mistake can put you there, and then the matchup is just kind of very, very difficult to deal with. And that's both because of his runes, his items. He builds boots and he builds Black Cleaver, so he gets a lot of movement speed. They also takes Ghost very frequently, so he's just pretty difficult to catch. So you got to beat him early on and avoid his Q and E whenever you can. So the win cons for these, they aren't completely helpless. They are difficult. I put down survive lane, so don't try to go for kills or go blow for blow or whatever like that, because you will try to or I mean, you will lose if you try too hard to win it. I put down pre-game planning. By that I mean champions with good lockdown. So say for example that you have Pantheon, that's a point and click CC. They aren't really going anywhere. If you pick something like a tank with a lot of slows and CC, that's also really good. You just want to make sure that they can't, freely move around you, because that's what these champions are kind of good at. Alright, so now we're back to easy matchups, but this time it's going to be for poke champions. So another kind of laner that you're going to play against in top lane are going to be champions that try to just whittle you down until they can all in you, or they could get a jungle to all in you, or, you know, worst case scenario for them, it'll be that you just have to recall a bunch, which gets them levels up on you. So Gangplank is kind of notorious for that with his Q. And then if you do manage to trade onto him, he can heal with his W. So the trick to Gangplank is going to be to use Fleet Footwork. And then once he runs out of mana, you would kind of tackle him. Victor was what came out of Worlds I think it was last year or 2 years ago. Can't remember. But that was a classic counter to Aatrox, and so many people played it, they found out it's not that bad. So I put it in the easy category because I also feel it's pretty easy. You kind of stomp him level 1 through 5, which is normally Aatrox's weak point. And then although he does start to scale up, if you're able to get a lead onto him, it's really not that hard. Wukong, I had him in the easy category before, I believe. I almost put him in the medium category just because he's a little bit overtuned in my opinion with the Season 10 changes. But the same concept kind of remains. He's not really too mobile. It's really just that he tries to poke you out with like his Q harass and then go invisible and run away. Urgot, he obviously has a lot of poke being from ranged. Um, the way that you outplay him is kind of don't use your E until he uses his jump. Because if you go forward and he lands it, then he's going to kind of kill you from there. Karthus, that's a pretty easy one. Or I'm sorry, I missed Olaf. I have Olaf under poke just because he has his axe that he can throw. And you don't want to keep fighting whenever he throws his axe just because he gets the reset. So it's kind of poke in that regard. Karthus, that's an easy one. He's not very mobile. So you just have to make sure you hit your abilities. And it doesn't matter that he pokes you out because you'll be able to all in him. And you'll notice that a lot of these poke champions, they are pretty squishy in total. So you just kind of have to all in when the opportunity arises. Then down there for like some tips, I just put down sustain their damage, burn their mana, and then play with your jungler to coordinate kills. Because they're just going to be focused on trying to whittle you down. Media matchups. So these are champions who still have a lot of poke that can be annoying to lane against, but they also have mobility, so it's hard to counter them in that regard, but not impossible, so I put them in the medium category. So Jace, obviously he has his range, he has his giant shot thing, so he could zone you very well. But if you give him a little bit of respect early on, then he won't be able to do too much to you. Same thing with Kennen. He has his, I believe it's his Q that he could throw out and try to whittle you down, but as long as you don't get hit by that and keep an eye out for those abilities, then you'll never really lose the lane, and then it's just up to you to connect with your Qs in order to tie it. Pantheon, I'm talking about the newer Pantheon that just came out this year, since this is the Season 10 guide. But that one's still not going to be too difficult to deal with. He could obviously poke you with his spear, but other than that, he can't really move too much. So once he burns his W or he burns his E, it's up to you to kind of land your abilities at that point. Gnar, I spoke about him earlier with the mobility, but he's also known for his poke, which is why he's kind of in that medium category. So his poke is of course going to be his Q. So just remember his Q cooldown. Know that if he misses his Bola or Zola or Boomerang, whatever the hell it is, that it's like a super long cooldown, so you have a lot of time to kind of bully him. Redectin, this is one of the only melee, I should say traditional top laners that will be very high poke and mobility. So he could kind of go in with E and then go back out and get a good trade in between. So you just kind of have to play around that. And by playing around that, I really mean that whenever he goes in, you have to save your E to go backwards. And then that way he has to make a choice. He either goes back without trading, or he has to commit further, in which case you'll be able to land your combo as well. Poppy. So Poppy can poke with both Q, so you want to make sure that you don't walk up when one of your minions is low, because he'll try to tag both you and the minion. And then he'll also be able to throw his, I don't know what it's called, the shield or whatever, but he throws an auto attack at you pretty much. And since Poppy's notorious for taking grasp, it can't hurt over time. So just make sure that you kind of heal all of those back up. Don't walk up whenever your minion's low for Poppy, and you'll have a good time. And that's a good general rule of thumb as well for just poke champions. If it's like an AoE poke, because they'll try to take both you and the minion at the same time. Harder poke matchups. So with these champions, they have a lot of poke, or it'll just be poke where you can't fight back at all. And you'll notice that I'm going to be repeating some champions just because they may fall under different categories. And you'll also find that the more categories that a champion fits under, the more difficult it is to deal with for Aatrox. And these are kind of universal in some regard too. So even though these are, I built these in mind for Aatrox, these are good for other top laners as well. So I also play like Mundo and Jax and Malphite and stuff like that. All these tips would apply for those champions as well. But Kalista, he can obviously poke with both his Q and just his range and never get hit. Rumble, he kind of isn't too difficult to deal with low elo, but in high elo he can kind of get super oppressive, just because of his E's can be super deadly, and his Q doesn't proc the minions to hit him, since it's AoE and not target damage. So that's kind of rough to deal with. And then he has a W to speed him up and shield him when you try to fight back. Heimerdinger, that's bit of a weird matchup, so I do bring him up later on. But he's also going to be one where he's going to have some mobility in the sense of CC and just kind of darting around turrets. And obviously his poke is going to be really heavy when he has a lot of turrets out. So what I wrote down at the bottom was, since even getting a lead in these lanes doesn't net you in one lane, tell your jungler to ignore you and play for the team. So by that, what I mean is, say you get a kill on Heimerdinger somehow, either through like a nice outplay or you do get a jungler help or something like that. If Heimerdinger has all three turrets up at 2 minutes later and all of his abilities up, you're not going to win that fight just because you have an item advantage on him or a level advantage on him. He's still going to be able to take you 100%. And it's the same with the other two champions. They're still going to be able to beat you just because of their kits. So you really don't want your jungler to be spending too much time top lane, just because you're not going to be able to get anything out of those. So normally once you get a lead, and this is just kind of a general thought, once you get a lead, you want to kind of push that lead. So you want to get minions, you want to push the lane and roam, just different things like that. You want to get objectives, you want to get towers. So you can't get any objectives or towers or farm when you're against these champions. So try not to waste your jungler's time or your time. Just survive the lane, take TP, look for plays bot. Just kind of try to be a team player. So now I'm not gonna cover like easy, medium, and hard matchups anymore. I'm gonna try doing them more by groups. So here I have the tank matchups. So I'll say what's difficult about tanks, but it's gonna be what's difficult is that they can take a CS deficit. So even if you trade well, even if you force them back, even if you are up by a handful of gold or half an item or anything like that, they're just gonna do a lot more in team fights since their kits allow them to, and tanks kind of infinitely scale. But you'll have your Maokais, your Malphites, Gragas, Nautilus, Ornn, Poppy, Shen. All those champs will do more than you after level 6. So the way that you kind of play around that, good item choicing. So you're going to want to cull. You're going to want to, stack up gold while you're harassing them. You're going to want to get some tank killing items. So make sure you have Grievous Wounds for a lot of them. Make sure you have Armor Pen. For rune choice, you're going to want Conqueror pretty much all the time against these guys. And then at the very front, I put pre-game planning. So try not to play games where they have too many tanks and you don't have a way to deal with them. If you have a handful of assassins and they pick like a Malphite and a Maokai, you're not going to have a very good time. So try to see if you could get like a good mix of damage. So both AD, like a consistent AD from your ADC and like a mage mid lane. Or best case scenario would be if you had like a Vayne or something that just shreds tanks, just so that you aren't going to be able to deal with them, but someone else can. And the reason why I have it in yellow and not red completely is just because tanks can't really threaten you in the form of like killing you in lane, and you still do get your core items, so you just have to kind of play with what you got. Alright, another form of top laner is like an all-in top laner, and these are characters that will pretty much take you from 100 to 0 if they play correctly, and you don't really have any counterplay to that. So Darius, for example, Mordekaiser is a popular one. He's kind of fallen out of popularity, but he still can be that threat. Garen, Riven, Tryndamere, and Kled. And you'll notice that what a lot of these champions in common, or will have in common, is that their ultimate is going to be an execute, or like a very close. So Darius execute, Garen execute, Mordekaiser traps you in the aiming to 1v1 you in execute. It's all going to be very similar. But you can't play, this is not supposed to say MP, this is supposed to say map. But you can't really play these matchups on their side of the map. And by their side of the map, I mean their side of the lane, sorry. Because if you do mess up and use like an extra Q where you shouldn't, or you use an E to poke them out, they can all in you because they just need room to run at you. They have more than enough damage and they'll normally be able to outrun you. So just be very safe. You want to kind of whittle these guys down over time. You don't want to look for all-ins against these guys. You kind of want to play with your jungler. Alright, lots of damage matchups. So that's kind of like a stupid name, but it does make a lot of sense. So what some characters have as an advantage is that they aren't necessarily the most popular champions, but they do have a lot of damage in their kit. So it can be kind of surprising. They can take people off guard. So if you kind of go into the match knowing that they have a lot of damage, and knowing that they will fall off, then you could kind of, play according to their power spikes and then outplay them. So Set and Alawi, they do a shit ton of damage, but their damage is dependent on Alawi landing his ability and Set landing his W. So you just need to avoid those abilities. So in the case of Alawi, once he uses his tentacle, you can go in. Before that, make sure you stand behind minions, make sure you're ready to juke. For Set, whenever he speeds himself up to catch you, that normally means that he can't miss his W, so just run away when he does that. He also he deals more damage when you deal more to him, so when you see his bar growing under his health bar, just know that you want to kind of run away from him at that point. Heimerdinger does a shit ton of damage. Akali does a lot of damage just because he has his shroud, so you can't fight back, and his Q is kind of spammable early game. Tryndamere has a lot of damage in the form of he can go infinite, just because his crit kind of amplifies his damage tenfold. Yasuo also has a lot of damage just because he has a Q, an E, and an auto attack. So it's kind of like having 3 auto attacks to every other champion's 1. So you got to be careful with him. And at the bottom I pretty much put what I said earlier. They're going solo queue because they're able to surprise people. Just watch out when they have their power spikes. So Heimerdinger power spike, he has 2 or 3 towers out. Akali power spike is when his shroud is up. When his shroud is down, if he goes into poke you, you can all in him because he doesn't have an escape. And then Tryndamere, that is his fury. So once his fury is up, he'll be able to crit a lot more. Then Yasuo, that'll be when he has like 2 Qs ready, for example, or if he has a lot of minions to dash through, because that means his E is going to deal more damage and he's going to be able to knock you up. Weird matchups. So I did include these guys in some of the categories earlier, but they do have more to them than just that. And they're also people, aside from the Fiora, that you don't run into too frequently. So Alawi, I already briefly touched on, but you have to dodge your tentacle. But at level 6, you kind of lose to Alawi, irrelevant of whether or not you won the lane previous. You also can't really gank an Alawi at level 6, so you have to keep that in mind. Rengar is weird, just because he can jump in and out of bushes to poke you out. So what you want to do is kind of anticipate when he's going to jump. He's normally going to try to take you like a poke champ, so whenever your minion is low, he might jump to take both your minion and to auto attack you. and pretty much you know that he's always going to run back to the bush, so he's easy to kind of predict in that sense. So you could hit 2 to 3 of your Qs if you know that he's going to be running back to the bush. So that's why he's only medium. Just watch out for him early, and you'll be able to outplay it. Heimerdinger. He's hard just because he dishes out a lot of damage, but he has a very good protection, and he's also hard to gank, just like an Alawi. Um, you just kind of want to avoid his stun. If you have your jungler, then you can gank him if he misses his stun. If he hits the stun, just back off. Um, if he has only a few towers down, you could also go in on him. You also want to look at his if he has a Zanias or not, because that's going to be his best item for outplaying you. So always check on that. Fiora, she kind of gets a bad rep as being, the biggest counter, and I used to be part of that train of thought. I used to think that Fiora was Aatrox's worst counter, and you do still see it in LCS, and a lot of people try to counterpick you with it. But it's actually a super easy matchup. And I put medium just because if you fuck up, it can be kind of annoying. But I would I would still pick Aatrox if I saw them pick Fiora. I wouldn't never, dodge in that situation, anything like that. So the thing about Fiora that makes her so difficult is she's mobile, which means that she could juke all your abilities. She is, has a lot of damage, so you can kind of get surprised by that. But her biggest thing is going to be her W, which redirects any CC that would be dealt to her. It also reduces attack speed. So, since you have 4 different things that can CC someone, that gives her 4 different opportunities to stun you. So what you want to do is Q her where the tip is going to hit her where you are, and then if she would parry, you have like a half second to react. So in that time frame, you can E to the side, and that way he won't stun you. He will still block your ability damage, but at least he won't stun you. And if you miss one Q, you'll still have 2 others that you could use. If he misses his W, he has nothing else that he could use on you. So that's what makes it, that matchup so easy. And if he gets aggressive, that's all the more opportunity to hit 2 or 3 of the Qs and then dodge the one. Just watch out at level 6, of course, since he could, get the 4 procs and just heal to hell. So you could try taking Ignite in the matchup. You could just kind of play against the wall. Don't play in the middle of the lane, just because he is so mobile that he'll probably hit all 4 spots. But other than that, he's pretty easy. Alright, and I did go through all my slides, and this is the last one right here. So by a parting note, I said don't be afraid to try going super aggro mid-game. By that I mean that Aatrox kind of falls off after the 30-minute mark. So if you get there, if you're 10-0, you might as well be 1-0 or 1-1, or it doesn't really matter. But his early game is also going to be kind of shitty. So just don't kind of think because you're so bad late that you're a good champ early, like a Talon or a Yasuo or anything like that. Your character is very weak early, so you need to pop off when you hit your level 4 to level 5 power spike. And then at like level 11 is when you kind of peak. So after that, just know that they're going to be dealing more and more damage, but you've kind of already reached your highest damage point. And that also has to do with items, because at that point you're going to start building your situational items, which are normally going to be defensive. So that's when everyone else's critical items are going to come in, like ADCs, for example, or mages, but you're going to be just hitting your situational items at that point. So just remember that in your games. So don't be afraid to try shit out if, games are 50-50, because they'll start getting kind of 70-30, 60-40 once you tend to fall off. But that's, the last slide that I have right there. I know it's a lot of information, but I just thought it would be better to kind of give you some general ideas how to play the different champions, as opposed to just how to play 60 different matchups, which is how I used to learn, and then I fixed up my play, and it's been helping me a lot. I've reached high diamond a lot with this train of thought, so I mean it does work. If you have any questions, let me know, or go watch some of my other videos if you want to watch specific matchups, and I'll be trying to post more and more in the near future. But anyway, have a good one. Bye bye.